This lecture covers Unit 3, the next two chapters in our textbook, Getting Involved and Falling in Love. Again, this is just an overview of the two chapters in this unit and doesn't replace your careful reading of the text. We're going to start off by discussing loneliness in our society. Throughout history, social bonds have been essential to our survival. To outsmart predators, we needed to evolve for increased cooperation. Despite our capacity for violence, we are social creatures whose ancestors learned and got better at interpreting signals from others so their genes could survive. In controversial experiments, psychologist Harry Harlow raised baby monkeys in isolation for 24 months to test the impact of maternal deprivation and isolation on social and cognitive development. The baby monkeys raised in isolation were seriously impaired, and these devastating effects have since been proven time and again. This highlights the way in which isolation doesn't suit our social nature. But loneliness does have a positive impact because it reminds us to seek the company of others to get support and to fulfill a basic need. While studies showing the scientific link between loneliness and mental and physical illness are fairly recent, they back up a wealth of research indicating that relationships are good for us. Love is known to promote health, strengthening of the immune system, and cardiovascular function, and it helps us to recover more quickly from illness. A happy marriage is known to lower blood pressure. A Focus on Families report by the Office of National Statistics in Great Britain showed that married people of both sexes have better health. So we are social creatures, but are we getting lonelier as a society? Many observers believe that changes in the way we work and live in the 21st century in Western society are having a negative impact on our mental and emotional health. Some see a link between our individualistic society and the increase in common mental health disorders in the last 50 years. Social scientists have observed that although we are better off materially, we are no happier than we used to be. A survey by the Mental Health Foundation found that 48% of us believe that people are getting lonelier in general. Behind such statistics are demographic changes and lifestyle choices which have reduced interpersonal contact. But shifts in attitude also play a part. Today, socializing and investing time in social ties are generally seen as less important than productive activities like work. We face so much pressure to be productive that we neglect so-called unnecessary relationships that are as vital as food and water. Long working hours are frequently cited as having a negative impact on family life. Another factor that has had a huge impact on interpersonal contact is new technology, particularly the internet. According to a study by the Kaiser Foundation, the average young American aged 8 to 18 spends more than 7.5 hours a day using a smartphone, computer, television, or other electronic device. Another study showed the average internet user spends 68 hours on the internet per month, about 2 hours and 6 minutes per day. Some researchers argue that social networking sites undermine our social skills and the ability to read body language. But virtual friendships can evolve into real-life friendships, and new technology can be used to reduce social isolation. If we are becoming more lonely as a society, the more likely we are to experience loneliness. Despite the fact that we are social beings, nearly everyone is lonely at one time or another, and some are lonely a good part of the time. Loneliness is a feeling of being isolated from desired relationships. Loneliness is not the same as aloneness. Most people prefer and benefit from a certain amount of solitude. Emotional loneliness can occur even when you have frequent contact with a particular individual or group of individuals. Long-term loneliness has serious negative consequences for people. Loneliness, which by definition means an inadequate amount of intimacy, leads to an array of other ills, which in turn feed back into loneliness and intensify it. The result is a downward spiral that can be difficult to stop. Loneliness can be a self-defeating and infinite loop. And as people get lonely, they start expecting rejection. They then begin to trust others less and may even become cold toward others. Healthy, fulfilled people operate from a base of intimacy. Intimacy is a fundamental need. As we grow, we tend to expand and alter our sphere of relationships and intimacy. Ironically, there is some evidence that intimate relationships have become more important to Americans than they were in the past. Intimacy is a relationship characterized by mutual commitment, affection, and sharing. Erik Erikson claimed that the central task of the young adult is to establish intimacy. In Erikson's view, intimacy includes such things between people as openness, sharing, mutual trust, self-abandonment, and commitment. Intimacy has somewhat different meanings for various people. Exchange theory argues that a one-sided intimate relationship will probably not last. Exchange theory also asserts that a satisfying relationship requires each partner to have a sense of equity or a sense of fairness in the sharing of disclosures and resources. Just as loneliness can generate a downward self-sustaining cycle, intimacy tends to generate an upward self-sustaining cycle. Intimate relationships develop over time. There is no instant intimacy. There are a variety of factors involved in this process of finding intimate possibilities. Propinquity, or nearness in place, is a major factor in finding intimate possibilities. Similarity is also an important factor in finding someone attractive. The probability is that those around you at work, school, or your neighborhood are similar to you in many ways. Similarities in education and intelligence facilitate communication and make conversations meaningful. Similarities build self-esteem as the other validates your attitudes and values, and build intimacy because of shared thoughts, feelings, and ideas. But what attracts us to other people? Well, first impressions are important because they determine whether we will pursue a relationship. Sometimes our first impressions are based on the similarity of the person to someone else we know, or they grow out of some stereotype. We all tend to make snap judgments about others based on things such as physical appearance and demeanor. The three most commonly used criteria by both men and women in determining whether someone is attractive are intelligence, education, personal traits, and physical appearance. As one is attracted to someone as a friend or potential lover, the relationship develops over time. Social scientists who are interested in the development of relationships have tried to identify specific stages or phases. The text identifies dating as the typical way to begin to develop an intimate relationship, which leads to a selection process, and then the development of intimacy through self-disclosure and an increasing sense of interdependence and commitment. The first stage involves initial meeting and awareness. There are social factors that lead to clusterings of relatively similar people. The second stage involves the filtering process. The most important factors are first impressions and the various bases for attraction. But two additional considerations need to be mentioned. First, we all operate within the context of the norms of our groups and of society. A second consideration is the compromises that we are willing to make to enter into a meaningful relationship with the other person. Once a relationship begins, certain mechanisms come into play and lead the participants into intimacy. One of the most important mechanisms in the development of intimacy is self-disclosure, the honest revealing of oneself to another person. As intimacy develops, an increasing amount of private information may be shared. As we disclose ourselves in an intimate relationship, trust tends to grow, enhancing the sense of intimacy. We gradually disclose more information, and intimacy grows as partners increase the depth and breadth of their disclosures. We seem to use different filters as we progress in relationships. There is a conceptually interesting filter theory out there which suggests that we use different screens at different stages of a relationship. That is, different types of self-disclosure are deemed appropriate and not filtered out, depending on the stage of the relationship. An increasing sense of interdependence develops during the third stage of intimacy. Interdependence and commitment are both essential elements of a developing intimate relationship, but they are also problem areas that can lead to the dissolution of the relationship. A fourth and final stage involves the maintenance or the dissolution of the relationship. Once a relationship begins to dissolve, many of the processes that built the intimacy in the first place work in reverse. Intimacy grows as people support each other and each other's self-esteem. Several factors may lead to a decision to break up. These include the perception of inequity, the lack of significant self-disclosure, cheating on one's partner, unhappiness, or finding a more desirable partner. Let's move on to take a look at Chapter 6, which talks about falling in love. Love is crucial to people's well-being, and love has many dimensions, which can be illustrated by 4 Greek words: storge, philia, eros, and agape. Storge is the kind of love found in the affection between parents and their children. Philia is the kind of love that exists between friends. Eros is the third love. Eros, from which we get the term erotic, is love between men and women. And finally, there is agape, a love that is independent of one's feelings for another. In other words, agape is to act on behalf of the well-being of someone else, whether you like that person or not. Love has so many different meanings to so many people. While there has been some progress in measuring and categorizing types of love, psychologist Ellen Burscheid notes there is a lack of understanding love as a phenomenon that changes over time. Efforts by psychologists and other social scientists to study love have primarily focused on the marital relationship. Today, romantic love is almost always linked to sex and marriage. It has not always been this way. For much of human history, there was no conception of love as a necessary part of either. There's nothing like the high of falling in love. The idea of falling means losing yourself to love. So you may feel a little crazy or even frightened, especially in the early stages. Although science has given us some insight into the nature of love and the chemical happenings in the brain when we are smitten, love still remains a mystery. Love has been called one of the most studied and least understood areas in psychology. Falling in love is, for most people, a complex process. Rubinstein has suggested that some people are love-prone, but even these people go beyond falling in love at first sight. Although some people do seem to experience love at first sight, including some who are not love-prone, for the rest of us, falling in love is a process. Ira Rice has characterized the development of love in terms of 4 separate but interrelated processes: rapport, self-revelation, mutual dependency, and intimacy need fulfillment. Although the process described by Rice applies to both males and females, some gender differences exist in experiences of falling in love. Typically, women are more concerned with relationships, and men more concerned with the work involved. Women come to a relationship with concerns about emotional closeness, while men are more concerned with practical help and sex. People have different points of view about how they can tell if they are in love. Actually, it isn't as easy as it might seem to know when we are feeling love or something else. In some cases, the feeling of love may actually be a case of misattribution of arousal, attributing the wrong emotion to physical arousal. In other words, there may be times when we believe we feel passionate love because we are aroused, and the conditions are such that the conclusion is reasonable. In some situations, we may mistakenly attribute arousal to a feeling of love. So don't confuse arousal with love. Remember that such things as vigorous exercise, heavy drinking, or sexy movies can arouse and trick our emotions into thinking that we are in love. Much thought has been given to the relationship between loving and liking. One useful way to understand the relationship between liking and loving is Rubin's love scale, tapping into three dimensions of loving: attachment, caring, and intimacy. In research using the Rubin scales, there is some overlap between loving and liking. Keith Davis has addressed the question of loving and liking, putting it in terms of the characteristics of love versus those of friendship. Both friends and lovers enhance our well-being. Love, and not security, is viewed as the foundation of marriage. The love that most people have in mind when they think of the precondition for an exclusive relationship, living together, or marriage is eros. Such love is sometimes called romantic love or passionate love, a preoccupation and intense longing for union with a particular other. In contrast, companionate love is affection for and commitment to someone with whom one is deeply involved. Thus, companionate love is similar to philia. People have always experienced passionate love, but the notion that passionate love is a precondition for a relationship like marriage is a relatively new idea in human history. No single explanation exists for the sudden appearance and spread of the ideal of passionate love. Romantic or passionate love as a precondition of marriage is still not universal. Many American observers actually bemoan rather than applaud this emphasis on passionate love. Often the experience of passionate love is a bittersweet experience. Passionate love has been compared with the high of certain drugs, such as amphetamines. Certain feelings and thoughts are typical of being passionately in love. There are different attachment styles that exist among different kinds of lovers: secure, avoidant, and anxious ambivalent. These three styles carry over into adult relationships. Secure lovers are those who find it fairly easy to get close to others. Avoidant lovers are somewhat uncomfortable about a close relationship with others, and anxious ambivalent lovers perceive a reluctance on the part of others to get close to them. Passionate love cannot last indefinitely, and certain changes occur as companionate love becomes dominant. The lovers stop idealizing each other and notice imperfections. Companionate love does not mean the relationship has lost its fire, for companionate love is important for both stability and satisfaction in relationships. Robert J. Sternberg has developed what he calls a triangular theory of love that shows how various kinds of love are related. His theory asserts that we can understand love best by viewing it in terms of three components. These components can be thought of as the vertices of a triangle. At the top is intimacy. On the left is passion, and on the right is decision commitment. Using these three components, we have a number of different types of love, ranging from the lack of all three, called non-love, to the consummate love that involves the presence of all three. The types include non-love, liking, infatuation, empty, romantic, companionate, fatuous, and consummate. Sternberg's typology is very useful for understanding differing kinds of experiences of love. Another useful way to understand love is found in the typology of John Allen Lee. Lee identified 6 types of lovers. The erotic lover tends to focus on the physical and particularly the sexual aspects of the relationship. The ludic lover views love as a pleasant pastime, but not something in which to get deeply involved. The storgic lover has a kind of quiet affection for the partner. Continuing with Lee's typology, the manic lover combines something of eros and ludus. A pragmatic lover is a combination to some extent of ludus and storge. The agapic lover acts on behalf of the well-being of the other without demanding or perhaps even expecting any benefits in return. Jealousy is a negative emotional reaction to a real or imagined threat to a love relationship. If jealousy is a deficiency, then perhaps all relationships are deficient, for jealousy seems to be universal. Who is most jealous? There seem to be few gender differences in the experience of jealousy. As one might expect, people who are insecure or who believe they are powerless in their love relationships are more likely to feel jealous. People with lower self-esteem have more problems with jealousy. From the point of view of conflict theory, we would expect a fair amount of jealousy. One way to think about jealousy-provoking situations is that they violate our expectations for our relationships. How an individual reacts when feeling jealous depends in part on attachment style. Jealousy can actually strengthen a relationship, but when it is too intense and too frequent, jealousy can be destructive. In addition, jealousy may lead to a loss of self-esteem and may lead to the loss of the partner. Another view on this emotion is that jealousy may be a sign that one partner cares about the other and values the relationship. Along this line of reasoning, jealousy can be helpful if it motivates us to work on the relationship. Some even go as far as suggesting that jealousy is a necessary emotion because if it is dealt with appropriately, it preserves social bonds. But the dark side of this emotion is it more often destroys relationships, and it can lead to relationship violence.